They floated in silence. No screams, no orders, just the soft lap of waves against bodies half curled in frozen prayer. The sea had taken on a deceptive calm, its surface glassy under the midnight sun, but beneath it, cold as death. Some clung to shattered planks, others to each other. A man whispered his daughter's name until his lips stopped moving. In the stillness of that endless Arctic dusk, hundreds of British sailors drifted without rescue, without hope, their ship gone and the horizon empty. The war had taken many ships, but this one vanished almost without a sound. The HMS Glorious had once been the Royal Navy's pride. Built during the First World War as a battle cruiser, sleek and fast, she was later transformed into an aircraft carrier, a steel behemoth bearing hurricanes and gladiators across the waves. By 1940, she was stationed in Norway, part of Britain's desperate attempt to hold off the German invasion. When orders came to evacuate aircraft and return home, Glorious obeyed. What followed was one of the most haunting naval disasters in British history. It began with a decision, quiet, procedural, and fatal. On June 8, 1940, the Glorious left Norwegian waters bound for Scapa Flow. Her decks were loaded with aircraft. With her were two escort destroyers, HMS Ardent and HMS Acasta. But rather than sail within the safety of the fleet, Glorious set off alone, and for reasons still debated, she sailed in a straight line, without zigzagging. Zigzagging was the Royal Navy's defense against surface raiders and submarines. It made a ship unpredictable, harder to target. But Glorious steamed forward like a blade through still water, unaware she was being watched. Far to the north, prowling the Norwegian Sea, two German battleships, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, cut across the gray horizon. Their orders were simple: hunt British vessels and disrupt the northern evacuation. That afternoon, through breaks in the mist, they spotted smoke on the horizon, an aircraft carrier, alone. The sea stilled, as if waiting. Aboard the German ships, the mood shifted from routine patrol to calculated violence. These were not lumbering dreadnoughts, but sleek hunters, fast, modern, and armed with 11-inch guns. Scharnhorst fired first. A shell arced across 24 kilometers of open water and struck true, slamming into Glorious's upper deck. In that moment, chaos erupted. The first shell tore into the hangar, igniting aviation fuel and starting fires deep inside the carrier. The second crippled the bridge. Officers were killed instantly. Communications went dark. The order to launch aircraft, already difficult under surprise attack, never came. Below deck, sailors rushed to jettison torpedoes and bombs before the flames could reach them. Above, shrapnel sliced through corridors. The ship heeled as fire took hold. Men screamed. Some were buried alive under twisted bulkheads. But the destroyers did not abandon her. Ardent veered into the fight, laying smoke and firing torpedoes at the towering silhouettes of the German ships. Acasta followed, braving shell fire to strike back. Against battleships, they were hopelessly outgunned. But they pressed in. Ardent took multiple direct hits and exploded, her wreckage swallowed in a plume of black smoke. Acasta, battered and bleeding, did the unthinkable. Her torpedoes hit Scharnhorst, tearing a hole nearly 40 feet wide into her hull. The German ship reeled, slowed. But Acasta was lost. Her hull split, her crew vanishing beneath the waves. At 6:10 p.m., the Glorious, burning, gutted, and listing, slipped beneath the sea. No radio call had gone out. No signal reached the Royal Navy. The Germans, confident in their kill, left the area. Then the sea was still again. Survivors clambered onto rafts, lifebelts, or debris. Some floated in oil-slicked water with wounds too severe to treat. Others, young men no older than 19, screamed for help into a sky that would not answer. Hypothermia took the first within hours. The Arctic water was only a few degrees above freezing. Within 15 minutes, most were paralyzed. Within the hour, many were dead. There was no rescue, no search. No one even knew they were gone. Back in Britain, their absence went unnoticed. The Royal Navy had received no distress call, no final coordinates. Days passed, then weeks. The government remained silent. The survivors were left to their fate. One lifeboat held nearly 30 men when the sun began to dip. By dawn, there were 12. A day later, 3. On one raft, a petty officer kept reciting prayers until his voice gave out. Others drank seawater in madness. Some leapt overboard, certain they saw land, but there was none. After 2 days, a Norwegian merchant ship stumbled upon the wreckage. Just 38 survivors were found, adrift, clinging to life. Several died soon after from exposure and untreated wounds. Of the more than 1,500 men aboard HMS Glorious and her escorts, only 41 would live. The British public wouldn't hear of the tragedy until much later. When they did, it came without full explanation, no public inquiry, no memorial services, no campaign medals for those lost in the Arctic swell. Whispers began to circulate among survivors and naval families. Why had Glorious sailed alone? Why no air patrol? Why hadn't aircraft been launched when the enemy was first spotted? And most haunting of all, why had she been sailing in silence? Some pointed to her captain, Guy d'Oyly Hughes, a decorated but headstrong officer who had once taken submarines under Arctic ice. His decision to separate from the fleet may have been motivated by a desire to personally deliver a court-martialed RAF officer to England. Others blamed the Admiralty. The war in Norway had descended into chaos. Orders were rushed, communications fragile. Some historians believe the Navy deliberately kept the sinking quiet to avoid public embarrassment during the retreat from Norway. Whatever the reason, the silence endured. For decades, the loss of Glorious remained a footnote, overshadowed by larger battles, greater losses. Only in time did the gravity of what happened begin to emerge. The Scharnhorst, damaged in the battle, would spend months in repair. Her crew, shaken by how close Acasta had come to sinking them, remembered the British destroyer with grim respect. One German officer later wrote that he had never seen such courage. They came at us like wolves, even as their ship fell apart. And the Royal Navy? It moved on. No medals were issued for the Glorious. No survivors were awarded honors. The few who lived bore frostbite scars, nightmares, and questions that no admiral ever answered. It would be 50 years before a full accounting of the battle reached public hands, drawn from German war records, survivor testimony, and declassified files. Even then, the answers remained partial. The sea, as always, had swallowed much of the truth. Today, HMS Glorious lies broken on the floor of the Norwegian Sea, 4,000 meters down. Her decks still cradle the wrecks of biplanes and twisted hangar doors. The destroyers that died beside her, Acasta and Ardent, rest nearby, silent monuments to a fight no one expected, and almost no one survived. There are no grave markers for most of the men who died, only names on walls, only stories told in low voices by the children and grandchildren of the lost. For some families, no final word ever came, just a knock at the door, a telegram, then silence. And yet, in that silence, something endures. A lesson, perhaps, that pride and protocol mean little against the indifferent ocean, that even the mightiest warships are vulnerable to a single mistake, and that courage, real courage, doesn't always come in grand victories, but in the last charge of a doomed destroyer or the soft voice of a man comforting the dying on a drifting raft. The sea remembers, even if nations forget. And somewhere, far below the waves, the Glorious still sleeps, Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.